When he had washed their feet and put on his outer garments and resumed his place, he said to them, "Do you understand what I had done for you? You call me teacher and Lord, and you are right, for so I am. If I then, your Lord and teacher, have washed your feet, you also ought to wash one another's feet. For I have given you an example that you also should do just as I have done to you. Truly, truly, I say to you, a servant is not greater than his master, nor is a messenger greater than the one who sent him." When Judas had gone out, Jesus said, "Now is the Son of Man glorified, and God is glorified in him. If God is glorified in him, God will also glorify him in himself and glorify him at once. Little children, yet a little while I am with you. You will seek me. And just as I said to the Jews, so now I also say to you, where I am going, you cannot come. A new commandment I give to you, that you love one another, just as I have loved you. You also are to love one another. By this, all people will know that you are my disciples, if you have love for one another." Growing up, no one really told me what Maundy Thursday means. I always assumed that Maundy Thursday was so named because we are all to be mournful as we await the passion of Christ on Good Friday. So I thought Maundy Thursday, we needed to come to church with a very sad and mournful look on our faces. We need to look like we have just lost someone dear to us. That's rather silly, actually. Because Maundy Thursday comes from the Latin mandatum novum, which refers to the new commandment. Jesus taught his disciples this new commandment, to love one another. In other words, Maundy Thursday ought to be considered New Commandment Thursday. Not Mournful Thursday, but New Commandment Thursday. On that very first Maundy Thursday, we recall that Jesus knew he was coming close to the end. That the day which he had been waiting for was coming soon. We are told by John that this feast may have been the Passover. But John wasn't just telling us the date of the event, he was telling us that Jesus had taken the Jewish festival of Passover and he had taken it and applied it to himself. For Jesus will soon become the Passover lamb. Do you remember the lamb that was sacrificed all those years ago when the Israelites were still in Egypt? In Exodus 12, we are told, "For the Lord will pass through to strike the Egyptians, but when he sees the blood on the lintel and on the two doorposts, the Lord will pass over the door and will not allow the destroyer to enter your houses to strike you." And so this meal, this Passover meal that Jesus is now sharing with his disciples will point beyond itself to the coming events of the following day. But you know, Jesus didn't just die and go to heaven. No, actually, after his death, Jesus, at least John tells us very clearly that Jesus was first raised to life, then he meets his disciples, and then only after that, he goes to his Father. And what happens here in this moment as Jesus is eating with his disciples points to us the highest act of love. You see, he is preparing to become the shepherd who will lay down his life for his sheep. John tells us that he loves his disciples to the very end. Even the one who at that very moment was scheming to betray Jesus. And John uses language that is so suggestive. As Jesus laid aside his glory and put on a human nature, now we are told that Jesus lays aside his clothes and takes on a towel of a servant and begins to wash his disciples' feet. But the point here is quite an interesting one. Was Jesus showing to us how incredible it is for God to wash the feet of humans? No, I think that Jesus was showing his disciples something far more profound than that. He was showing his disciples that it is precisely because he had come from God that foot washing and later on the crucifixion, these things were Jesus' way of showing who God is. It is not that it is a big deal that God is washing his disciples' feet, but that it is a big deal that our God is a foot washing kind of God. That our God is a die for you kind of God. So allow me to share for us 3 points which I think we can meditate on as we come to this day, Maundy Thursday. A foot washing kind of God. Now, first, we can meditate on the humility of Jesus. Jesus, the Son of God, the King of Kings, yet Jesus who displays such humility. You know, his humility can be seen that though he was fully divine, he took on human flesh and he dwelt among us. He willingly humbled himself to become a human being born in humble circumstances in a manger and grew up a simple carpenter's son in Nazareth. Jesus' humility in stepping down from his heavenly throne to identify with humanity is the most profound thing that humankind will ever experience. His humility was also evident while on his earthly ministry. He associated and interacted with people who were considered outcasts, sinners, marginalized of society. He showed no partiality or favoritism based on social status, race, or gender. He embraced the poor, the sick, the lepers, the Samaritans, and now here he washes the feet of his disciples, including Judas, who would later betray him. Jesus did not consider himself above anyone, but rather he served with humility and compassion, demonstrating that true leadership is found in humble service. I enjoy this painting by Paolo Veronese depicting Jesus washing the feet of his disciples. You know, the artist shows a room with high ceilings and elaborate decorations. And then, if you notice, Jesus' head is actually positioned the lowest, the one with a cloth around his waist. Actually, second lowest. There is another character on the far left who some people speculate is the artist painting himself in. But anyway, Jesus' head, at least in this painting, shows us his humility. For he does not demand or ask of others to bow down to him. Even though he is God and the creator of the universe, but his posture and his head is the lowest. And that expresses and shows to us his humility. Instead of asking others to consider him for who he really is, God himself, King of Kings, he treated everyone with kindness and compassion, not seeking to gratify himself, but giving himself all for others. In February some of us from Holland Village Methodist Church made a trip to East Timor or Timor-Leste. And it was a wonderful trip, a short one for myself, but we spent several days interacting with the missionaries there, as well as, look at the ministry that has been built in East Timor. One of the things that struck me and stayed with me, even as I came home, was a photo that I had taken of this room. Now, not of, Kwok-on, Sapphire, and Michelle. That was not why I remembered this photo, but rather, I found myself showing this photo to many people who asked me about my trip to East Timor. Now, you may find this strange. I didn't show them photos of the wonderful hostel that Methodist Mission Society has built. I didn't show them photos of that big plot of land where we're building a new school. I didn't show them the photos of many Timorese young youth and young adults. But I showed them this photo because we had learned that this room that you see, this room was in the missionaries' home. And because the school which they had built had grown to such a size that they had converted almost all the bedrooms in their home into classrooms. And this room is the living room, the dining room, and the bedroom for 3 of their children, grown children. When I think of this photo, I think of how 3 young persons together with their family had given up all their comforts in Singapore to share one room every night together, albeit with a TV, a very, very large one. But imagine that. The humility of giving up what you deserve or what you ought to have so that you may serve others. This room reminds me of the humility of Jesus, who left the glory of heaven to sleep in the slums of this world. This room reminds me of the humility of Jesus, who did not count equality with God something to be grasped, did not count his privileges as things to be hung on to, but gave it all up so that in humility he may show humankind who God is. But the second thing we can meditate upon this evening is the servanthood of Jesus. Jesus is the Son of God, the King of Kings, but yet he displays such servanthood. His servanthood can be seen, for though he was the master of his disciples and really their leader, he took it upon himself to serve them. Despite the act of foot washing being reserved for the lowest of servants. Jesus was their master, yet he took on the role of a servant and performed this humble act of service to his disciples. In his earthly ministry, Jesus consistently demonstrated a servant's heart through his actions. He tirelessly ministered to the needs of others, healing the sick, feeding the hungry, and provided comfort and compassion to the hurting. Jesus' miracles were not for his own benefit or glory. In fact, he often told those who benefited from his miracles to keep quiet about it. But they were acts of service to those in need, showing his selfless and compassionate nature. Jesus did not consider himself to be anything other than a servant, and he taught his disciples to embrace a servant's heart and prioritize serving others over seeking positions of power and authority. In one of my previous churches, I had an idea of starting a toilet cleaning team. A toilet cleaning team is not regularly found in the role of ministries that churches have. But I thought it might be a good idea, and we'll see who would respond. And so over 3 Sundays, we made invitations for people to join us in this newly formed toilet cleaning team. And to my surprise and great delight, several people responded. In fact, during one particular service, we made an altar call at the end of the service, and it was, if the Lord is speaking to you to serve in the toilet cleaning team, put up your hands. And a bunch of people did, and they joined the toilet cleaning team. We called for a meeting, as all good Methodists do, before starting work. We gathered all the people who had signed up for the toilet cleaning team, and we came together, we sat at the front of the church, and we started our briefing. Halfway through my briefing, somebody raised his hand, and I said, "Yes, what is your question?" And the person replied, "Pastor, you are serious? We are actually going to clean the toilet." But credit to every one of those persons who responded to be part of this team. We came together to clean the toilets around the church every Saturday afternoon. Some of these persons who were on this team had multiple helpers at home. Some of these people who responded had not cleaned a toilet in the last 20 years. But when they felt the prompting of the Holy Spirit to be part of such a team, they responded because Jesus was such a servant. Because Jesus was a servant who never considered his status or who he is as divine. Jesus who lowered himself to become a servant. Lastly, we can meditate on the love of Jesus. Jesus is the Son of God and the King of Kings. Yet he displays such sincere and genuine love. His love can be seen in, of course, the act of foot washing, of his deep and unconditional love for his disciples. It was a tangible demonstration of how much he cared for them, and he was willing to do anything to show them his love, even the most humble and menial task. This act of love showed his disciples that love is not just a feeling, but it is also an action. Love requires one to put others before ourselves and to be willing to make sacrifices for others. You know, the truth is, a person's success in life should not be measured by his abilities, his financial achievements, his fame, or his power. A person's success should be measured by his love for others. And in that, Jesus showed us and turns the world around. For Jesus shows us that his love for others is immeasurable, that he will love them to the very end. But you know, friends, Jesus' love was not limited to his disciples. He extended it to all of humanity. And he willingly gave his life on the cross to redeem and to reconcile us to God. He washed away our sins. And from the conversation that Peter had with Jesus, we can see that this act of washing feet not only was a physical demonstration of his service and humility, but also of a sign of how Jesus would soon wash away the sins of humanity through his sacrificial death on the cross. This famous painting by Salvador Dali shows Jesus and the cross viewed directly from above, looking down on the clouds and the earth below. The perspective that Dali uses is a heavenly perspective. It's as if God is looking down at his son, Jesus, and his son shares the same gaze as he stares through the clouds into the world. The imagery here is of God the Father offering his Son to the world to save it by his love sacrificially, giving up what was most precious to him to save others. And just as Jesus cleaned and washed his disciples' feet, Jesus comes to cleanse and to purify our souls from the dirt and the stains of sin. And he offers to each and every one of us a fresh start and a new beginning. Jesus did not merely suggest that his disciples love one another. He commanded them to do so. Maundy Thursday celebrates the new mandate. That love is not optional for us who follow Jesus. It is a requirement. We are called to love others as Christ loved us, and this is not easy. It requires us to put aside our differences, to forgive one another, to extend grace to those who we think do not or may not deserve it. But Christ commanded that we who follow him are to love one another, just as he had loved us. For by this all people will know that we are his disciples, if we have love for one another. One of the phrases that I like to use to describe the church is this: we are brothers and sisters serving brothers and sisters. We are brothers and sisters serving brothers and sisters. And those of you who have served with me over this last 1.5 years of my time here at HVMC would have heard me say this to you. Certainly, I hope the staff team remembers this, and many of the leaders that I've had conversations with, that we are brothers and sisters serving brothers and sisters. You see, friends, I believe that this captures for us what it means to live out the new commandment. If we are not brothers and sisters serving brothers and sisters, then we are not the church. And we are not those who follow Jesus. His new commandment then suggests to us that we too must follow in his humility, in his servanthood, and his love. So we will be starting a toilet cleaning team now. But friends, would you consider showing kindness to others this week? Would you consider showing someone a foot washing act? Would you consider setting aside 1 hour each week to serve someone, even if you think it's beneath you? 1 hour a week to do an act of kindness, to love someone, and to serve those around you. For by this, the world will know that we are his disciples. Let us pray. Almighty and gracious God, we thank you for in the example of Jesus, we are pointed to a God who is a foot washing God. A God who is a die for us kind of God. So help us also to put on that same humility, servanthood, and love. That we may love others without a sense of entitlement, but to love others selflessly as you have loved us. That truly by our actions and our kindness, the world may know the love of Jesus. Jesus who gave himself up for us, who gave up everything so that he may bring humankind back to his Father. And so, Lord, even as we meditate and ponder this evening over the humility of Jesus, his servanthood and love, help us also to carry on his love into this world. We pray all this in the name of our Master, Jesus Christ. Amen.